Glory be to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, one true God, Amen. So good afternoon, everybody. See that some of you are very comfortably settled in your chairs after lunch, looking towards the prospect of a session of learning about icons, right? So I think the title of this session is a little bit misleading. It said Iconography Seminar. I'm sorry to disappoint you if you came here thinking that this is about how you draw an icon or how you produce it. That's not what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, nowhere near that. Instead, I think this seminar is more aptly titled as Introduction to Icons. Right? The goal being we'll get to learn a little bit about the basics of the symbolism, the colors and icons, and that will hopefully spur your curiosity or your interest in icons to go and explore further than what you see here today. Okay? And then, like Achin said, it's a regular guy who happened to take an interest in icons a couple of years back, not so long ago. I think it started out with sort of like a fascination for icons because there seemed to be this mystery around them through the symbols and the gestures and the colors, and that slowly evolved into sort of like a curiosity, and that curiosity then prompted me to just go online and read about icons through various online materials, online blogs that various Orthodox churches have published. And then I think I read a couple of books here and there. I don't remember their names, but pretty much everything that I'm telling you here today is self-taught. Okay, I am not trained by any means in iconography. I have no expertise in this particular area, so I may make a couple of mistakes here and there. I'm hoping that the clergy here will correct me. But I'm hoping that the same passion that inspired me will inspire you as well as you leave today's session. Okay? All right, to start off, just a general assessment of everybody's familiarity here with icons. So, which among these is an icon? All right, so my whole session was planned around this slide. I was going to go from left to right, but apparently everybody here knows what icon is, right? Okay. The blue-eyed Jesus? I walked into the sanctuary yesterday evening for Compline, and I saw this icon on the altar, and I was like, everybody's probably going to notice it. I don't know if you guys noticed it, right? This very icon is there on the altar there. I think it's along with an icon of St. Mary. It's definitely the last one is an icon. It's an icon of Christ. Just a little bit of information about that icon. That icon is actually a very familiar icon in the Orthodox Church. You can obviously it's on the altar there. It was actually produced in St. Catherine's Monastery, which I believe is perhaps the oldest active monastery in the world. Okay, so this monastery was built, I think, in the mid-500s, so 6th century, and it's still active. It's at the foot of Mount Sinai, okay, in present-day Egypt. And this icon was produced there. It's known as Christ, the Pantocrator icon, I think, which means Christ, who is the creator of all. And so, yeah, it is the last one that is the icon. Okay? Oh, and I think the third one, I'm pretty sure you must have seen the third picture there in many of our houses, right? That, I believe, is a Catholic tradition. It's called the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Obviously, that is not in line with our Orthodox theology. Orthodoxy does not view a part of Christ as being more sacred than anything else. We view Christ as a whole as being sacred. So we don't, venerate or worship a specific portion of Christ. Does that make sense? So that is not in line with Orthodox faith. All right, leveling up. Which among these is an icon? Last one? All three? Yeah. I knew you would show up. So the first one, or which tradition is the first one then? What's that?
Could you explain why in the first one, why only the last one was the icon and not the other three?
Oh yeah, I'll get to that through the middle of the slides. Good question. It's because an icon is, when an icon is written, it usually said as an icon is written instead of icon is drawn. It's done with a certain discipline. Okay. And I'll go into that later as we get into the slides, or if you have time. But yeah, everybody agrees that all three of them are icons?
Yeah.
No? Who says no? Did you say no?
I thought the second and the third.
Second and the third. Why not the first one?
Because the way it's drawn, like it's around the face.
Very cartoonish.
Yeah.
So they're all icons, but I would think that yes, perhaps you're not familiar with the first one, right? So the first one is actually a Coptic icon. Okay. The second one is a Syriac icon, and the third one is I guess the technical term is a Byzantine icon. All right. So that means that you would see this in a Russian or Greek Orthodox church, or Bulgarian or Romanian, but all three of them are icons. Okay, and they're all an icon of Saint Mary with the infant Jesus, right? Now, what's common to all of them? Take a look at Saint Mary. The way they're standing, the way they're posing, perhaps the way Saint Mary is holding her hand, right? As in, she is the central figure of the icon, but her hand is pointed towards Christ, right? And then the colors, maybe a little bit of the red and the blue, and then of course the halo. And so on the surface, they're definitely similar, right? And they're all icons. Now there are certain nuances here and there, and then we'll go into those later. But they're all icons in different traditions. Okay, so just like the Coptic Church has their own liturgy, which may seem different than our liturgy, it's the same thing as icons, right? It's their own tradition. They have a little bit of differences than what you may be commonly used to, but they are all icons. Okay. Yeah, we're not doing one more of those. Which of these is an icon? So we're going to start with an icon of Christ. So actually the icons in the rest of the slides are all icons in the Byzantine style, because I think that's what everybody here is perhaps very familiar with. So we'll be looking at icons in the Byzantine style, okay? So this is, well, they're both icons of Christ. And some of you may know that something that is, and going back to your question, something that is very unique about an icon of Christ, and that is very striking in this icon, is this halo, right? Only the halo of Christ has a cross on it, okay? And if you go back to the previous slide, you can see that all the icons where Christ is there, there's a cross on his halo, right? So you're going back to the question that you asked, what about the portrait of Jesus, or one where Jesus had green eyes? The icons are all consistent regardless of the tradition they come from, right? If Christ has a halo, there's always a cross on that halo, okay? And then the colors of let's say the robes that he's clothed with also have a very specific meaning, right? In the Byzantine tradition and in most of the other traditions as well, the color of blue signifies that which is celestial or divine. And the color of red signifies that which is of earth or man, right? So the colors here are meant to teach us that Christ is of both natures, both divine and human. Does that make sense? And if you look closely, you'll see that there's really no separation, as in, the top half is blue and the bottom half is red. Instead, they are interwoven to teach us that he is both human and divine at the same time. Does that make sense? Okay. And then the gold band on his shoulder, that is a sign of authority. Okay? Now, I don't know if you can recall any movies where ancient Rome was portrayed, but in those times they had these senators, and they would have a gold band on their shoulder to signify that that was a person of authority, right? And Isaiah prophesied in his book that the Messiah will come, and the government shall be on his shoulders, as in he will rule all governments, right? So this gold band is a symbol of the government or of the world on his shoulders. Make sense? Okay. So, so the halo has a cross. And now one more thing that is very specific to the Byzantine icon is the inscriptions on the cross. Okay? So those three letters on the cross, the left, the top, and the right, are taken from the Greek alphabet. It's the omega, the omicron, and the nu letters of the Greek alphabet. And I don't know if everybody can see it. Okay? And the reason they are there is because if you go all the way back to the Old Testament to the time of Moses, okay, we all know the story of Moses and the burning bush, right? He's a shepherd and he goes before this burning bush, and God instructs him to take off his sandals and tells him to go back to Egypt and free the Hebrew slaves, right? And of course he comes up with a lot of excuses, but at the end he says, okay, you know what? I will go back to Egypt, I will face the Pharaoh, I will tell him to free the Hebrews, but when I go back, they're going to ask me who sent you, right? Does everybody remember the story? He says, I need a name. And what does God say? Actually, no. Well, he says that later. He first says, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses says, that's not enough. Okay, that's maybe who you are, but I need a name, right? And that is when God speaks out of the burning bush and says, I am who I am. That who I am in Hebrew is Yahweh. Okay, or in Malayalam we say Yehovah. But in Greek, it is the abbreviation of that who I am, or he who is the Omega, Omicron, the new. So that icon is telling us that Christ is he who was, who is, and who will be. Okay? Make sense? Okay. So all these things I think they're common to both the icons, right? Now, what's different in the icons though? His fingers, right? The way he's gesturing with his hand. I'm going to do my fancy animation here. Zooming in. Pretty cool, right? That's the one thing I'm very proud of with PowerPoint. I learned how to zoom in. It's almost as I can put on my resume, you know. Yeah, the fingers. So there is a lot of meaning and depth to the way he's holding his fingers. So in the first one, the one on the left, right, he has his index finger, middle finger, and then the remaining two fingers are sort of coming down towards the thumb. That is to signify the Trinity, as in the Father and the Holy Spirit, and then both the divine and the human natures of Christ coming down to man. Okay? Again, a lot of depth and meaning in the way he's holding those fingers. Everybody get that? The second one is where he's holding his index finger up, kind of bent the middle finger, and then it's forming like an X with his ring finger and the thumb, and then the little finger, the pinky, is kind of curved as well. So that is actually showing the letters, the Greek letters of I, C, like X, and kind of C. Does that make sense? So you have the I, the curved C, the X, and the C, right? And that is an abbreviation of his title, or actually his name and title, which is Jesus Christos, which is Jesus Christ. Okay? Jesus being his name in Greek, and Christos, or Christ, meaning what? The what? The anointed, right? Absolutely. So this is Jesus Christ, the anointed one. Okay? And his name in Greek being Jesus, which is a translation of his original name in Hebrew, which is... Okay, I'm sorry to disappoint you all, but he wasn't called Jesus by anybody during his time. Okay? I'm assuming everybody knows that. His real name was Yeshua. Okay? Jesus is an English variation of the Latin translation of the Greek Jesus, which came from the Hebrew Yeshua. Okay? So yeah, it went through a lot of evolutions. There is no J in the Hebrew alphabet. There is no J in Greek. So he was called Yeshua, and in the Greek translation it became Jesus, and in Latin again Jesus, and then in English Jesus, right? And this is just a little going off a tangent here. This is the same for a lot of names in the Bible. Okay, for example, Moses. Moses was never called Moses. Okay, Moses was called Moshe. So a lot of the names in the Malayalam are very close to the original names. Like we say Moshe. Okay? That was his name. Instead, when it was translated into Greek, Moshe became Moses, because in the Greek tradition, male names had to end with an S. Okay, so for example, Pontius, Augustus, right? And so whenever the Greeks translated the Septuagint Bible, which was translated from the Hebrew, they took these names and they added S to it. So that's how Moshe became Moses, and Yeshua became Jesus with the S at the end. Okay? But anyway, so the reason we have Jesus is because of the I and the C, which is the abbreviation of his name, and Christos being the abbreviation of Christ. Cool? Right, so everybody knows this is an icon of Saint Mary, right? So one striking thing of this icon is sort of like the reversal of the colors. So remember in the first, in the icons of Christ, I said he has, the red and the blue are interwoven such that there is no clear separation between them. But when it comes to the icon of Saint Mary, you can see the blue is hidden within the red, right? And what does that tell us? That her humanity bore or contained divinity. Okay? The other very important feature about the icon of Saint Mary is the 3 stars you can see on her shoulders. Okay, so there's one on the left, one on the right, and one on top of her head, right? And this is to signify the virginity of Saint Mary, that she was a virgin before, during, and after Christ. Okay, and again, I think it was Benny who asked, like, okay, why aren't the other 3 pictures icons? Because if you look at all the icons in that slide, you can see Saint Mary is portrayed with these 3 stars, regardless of the tradition, whether it's Coptic, whether it's Syriac or Byzantine. I'm assuming everybody can spot those 3 stars, right? See, that's what brings us all together. Like the orthodoxy behind the icons is universal. Does that make sense? Uh-huh.
Why did they invert the colors, having the blue on the outside?
Yeah, so that's like I said. So there are a little bit of differences there. Like I said, the Byzantine tradition is the one that associates blue with the celestial and the red with humanity.
I think it's the opposite.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
the opposite.
it's the opposite?
In the Byzantine tradition.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, there are a little bit of variations, but the core theology is there, right? That perpetual ever virgin Saint Mary. And like I said, right, this is all from different countries. It's all different traditions. Yeah. Everybody cool? So the other icon of Saint Mary, this is a wonderful icon as well, is one that ties an event from the Old Testament to a reality in the New Testament, right? Anyone knows what that icon is about? I think we just kind of talked about it, right? The burning bush, right? Just as the bush was a flame but did not burn, the same way Saint Mary, a creation, carried him who was not created and was not consumed. Right? So it's taking an event from the Old Testament, something that foreshadowed, something in the future, right? That one day creation itself would bear the Creator. So just as the bush was not consumed, Mary was not. Which one?
The second one of the burning bush, because I haven't seen that. Her at the burning bush.
Oh, I think it's in one of our morning prayer songs as well. Is
No,
it
where
there?
is that icon?
No,
Oh, yeah, it's a Byzantine icon as well. Yeah, they're all Byzantine icons. Okay, but yes, I believe there's a hymn in our morning prayers as well, right? That signifies that the burning bush was indeed foreshadowing the incarnation. Okay, cool. So another thing that you might find in icons, again in the Byzantine tradition, and I'm not sure if this is common to the other traditions as well, is, or let me pose the question, what's common between these 2 icons? I mean, apart from the halo. And this is not a very tricky, deep, profound kind of thing. What's common between them? The crosses, right? The person on the left is holding the cross, the woman is holding the cross. You may not be able to see it, but the child is holding a cross as well. So in an icon, or at least in the Byzantine icon, if you see a person holding a cross, it means that that person was a martyr. Okay, it means that they died for their faith. Okay, and so the person on the left is Saint Pantaleimon. He's a saint only in the Greek tradition, not really in the Oriental Orthodox tradition, but This is just general information. Sometimes we group the saints together and give a name to the group. For example, I'm sure you might have heard of the Cappadocian Fathers, right? They're a set of church fathers. Or you might have heard of the Stylites, right? Can anybody here name a Stylite? Simeon the Stylite, right? Or Daniel the Stylite. In a similar way, in the Greek tradition, there's a group of saints who are known as the unmercenaries. And these are a group of saints that, through the grace of God, were able to heal numerous people. So they were doctors by profession, but they were able to heal and perform a lot of miraculous healing that they just did for free for a lot of people. And Saint Pantaleimon, as you can see, he's like holding like a box of medicines, right? He is one among those group of unmercenary saints. Okay. Now the one on the right. Anyone know who's portrayed in that icon? So that is Saint Julieta and her 3-year-old son, Saint Kyrikos. Okay. Now their feasts are celebrated in the Indian Orthodox calendar as well. I think it's sometime in March or February. But they were saints who lived in the 3rd century and who died during the persecution of, I'm not sure if it was Diocletian or one of those Roman emperors. They were both executed for their faith, the mother and the 3-year-old son. The 3-year-old son's name was Kyrikos. And so if you have a name that's either your first name or your last name that is Kyriakos, you can always take pride in knowing that your name is derived from this 3-year-old boy who died for his faith. Okay, he's named Kyrikos. Cool. Any questions so far? Nope. All right, now we are going to put to test what we have learned so far. Okay? So what's going on in the first icon, the one on the left? That was quick. Okay, how do we know that the older lady is not Saint Mary? 3 stars, right? So if the person is portrayed with 3 stars, regardless of the colors, because even in the Coptic icon, the colors were reversed, but the child has 3 stars, so that has to be Saint Mary, regardless of the age or the context or whatever it is, right? Saint Mary is a child being held in the arms of 2 elderly people. You can deduce, right? It's Joachim and Anna, Saint Joachim and Anna, who very much like Abraham and Sarah had, Mary, were blessed with Mary much later in their years. What about the second one? Somebody already said? Well, who's the child? It has to be Jesus, right? How do we know that? Cross and the halo, right? So that is an icon of Saint Christopher. I think. Have you heard of Saint Christopher? Like how? I mean, I didn't assume that Saint Christopher was popular among Indian Orthodox Christians. He's the patron saint of travelers. So there's a very interesting story about his life, which is, I'm sure everybody here might have heard of Abba Moses of Egypt. He was a very big man. In a similar manner, Saint Christopher was blessed with just great physique. He was a very big man. According to tradition, he was 7.5 feet tall, big guy. He was a bit of a rogue. He was a pagan. And then later in his life, he met a Christian ascetic, a monk, and then after talking to him, he realized that it's time to change my life and do some good. And the monk, he said, "What should I do?" And the monk said, "Well, you can start fasting and praying." And he said, "Well, look at me. You think I can fast and pray?" He said, "I got to eat." And then the monk said, "Okay, you know what? There's a very dangerous river in this particular town, so much so that people fear crossing it. Devote your life to transporting these people across the river, and you shall be saved." And that's what he did for the rest of his life. Okay, he would carry people on his shoulders across this river and take them to the other side. And one day, a little boy came to him, and he carried that boy on his shoulders to the other side of the river, and that boy revealed himself to be Christ. And Christ blessed him for what he did, in risking his own life by transporting those people across the river. One of the things that really stood out to me from this icon is, Saint Christopher wasn't really ordained. He wasn't really a priest or a deacon or a bishop. He was never an ascetic or a hermit or a monk. Yet his life speaks volumes to us about what we can do as well, right? We don't have to be part of the clergy, or we don't have to be part of a specific ministry. But if we do something that helps others, that's an act of kindness or care or comfort, that is recognized by God. And I think the life of St. Christopher is a prime example of that. Ordained by nobody, didn't live in a monastery, but he devoted his life to safely bringing those people to the other side of the river, and he was blessed for that. Okay? All right, last one. He's holding a cross, so he has to be a martyr. He appears to be wearing a stole across his shoulder, so he has to be a deacon. Who was a deacon who was a martyr? St. Stephen. Cool? Did everybody get that? No? Anybody know what stars? Are you good? Alright, so this is the last of the slides. This is the icon of the Holy Trinity. In fact, I think this is the only icon in the Orthodox Church that has been officially recognized as an icon of the Holy Trinity. Okay? This was done by an iconographer named Andrei Rublev. And there's a lot of depth and meaning in this icon. Really a lot of theology that we can infer and learn from this icon about the Trinity. Okay? So who's in the center? Christ. Christ is in the center. We know through the colors and the gold band. The person to the right of Christ is, the person depicted there is the Holy Spirit. Okay? The Holy Spirit is usually shown in a lot of green. Green being the color of life and liveliness and spirit. And the person on the far left is God the Father. Now God the Father, you can see a little bit of the blue that signifies his divinity, but a lot of it is shrouded in mystery. Okay, because one can approach God the Father only through Christ. Okay, and so that is why his divinity is sort of shrouded in mystery. And they are pointing towards, before I go there, this icon is actually taken from an event in the Old Testament. Okay, so there's a story in the Old Testament called the Hospitality of Abraham, where 3 messengers come to Abraham and visit him, and then announce to Abraham that they are going to have a child, right? And in the Orthodox tradition, this story is interpreted by the fathers as the Trinity visiting Abraham at that time. Okay, and so the stuff in the background is all taken from that story. So it said in the Bible that he was living by the oaks of Mamre, and so you have the tree over there, and of course he was living there, and so they have a house there. But the fathers interpreted it with a lot of depth and meaning to show that the Trinity was there, and now they're showing the path of the Christian life, okay, from that story and through this icon, which is through the Holy Spirit, we ascend that mountain. Okay, we relieve ourselves of all that is earthly, and we ascend the mountain of faith and come to who? Christ, who was crucified, and that is signified by the tree behind him. And through Christ we come to who? God the Father, who has prepared a house with a lot of rooms for us. Okay, so like I said, there's a lot of meaning in that icon, showing us not just the Trinity, but how we commune with the Trinity as well. And that's also signified by the fact you can see there's a meal on the table, and it's not really at the center of the table. Instead, it's pushed towards the edge to invite us to partake of this. Does that make sense? It's not meant for them. Instead, it's meant for us as well. And then the relationship between the Trinity as well is portrayed through the poses and the stature that they have. For example, if you look at Christ and the Holy Spirit, you see them bowing down to who? The Father, right? Because the Father is sort of the fountainhead of the Trinity. And so the Father does not bow down to anybody. Instead, the begotten Son and the Holy Spirit who proceeds from him bow down to the Father. Cool? Yes?
Why doesn't Jesus' halo have a crown?
Okay, I was hoping nobody would ask that. There goes the foundation of my entire talk, right? You could have just asked me that in person outside. Okay, so the reason why that halo does not have a cross is because, like I said, this is the only icon that is considered as canonical, as a canonical icon of the Holy Trinity. Okay, and when this icon was done, there was not an ecumenical council, but a council in the Russian. So the person who did this is Russian. Like I said, his name is Andrei Rublev. There was a council in the Russian Orthodox Church that looked at that and said, the Trinity is sort of like three persons that are one and the same. And it would be, I wouldn't say like unfair, but it would be like an injustice to the other persons of the Trinity if Christ was portrayed with a halo that was different from the other two. You see what I'm saying? That is the only reason why they took it out. Because, in the Trinity, it's three distinct people, but we say that they're all equal as well, right? And so, the fathers of that, and this was way back in the 1500s. Okay, this icon is pretty old. They decided to take it out just to make sure that the viewers don't interpret it differently as seeing the Son portrayed a little bit better than the other two, right? It's not like this, glory of Christ is, any more better than the other two. I might be saying this wrong, but that's the general idea, right? They didn't want to make the Son stand out, at the expense of the other two. Does that make sense? And that's why that halo doesn't have a cross. Yes.
What are their feet like with those placements? Does that mean something?
Of all the things. We talked about the mountain, the cross, you're going to the floor mat, you're bringing it all the way back down. I don't know, maybe they just want to have some mats on the floor. Like I said, I'm not an expert. Yeah. I don't know, maybe in the Middle Eastern tradition you don't sit on the floor, you maybe sit on a mat, right? So perhaps when Abraham served them, he served them on a mat. Okay? Not everything in here is deep and profound. Okay? Practical. So that. Oh, just do it one more time. So
no, I'm saying because they're kind of bending towards the Father.
Yes, because both of them are bending towards that house, right? As in showing that is the ultimate goal. Our return, just like Evasion said, right? Our return as the prodigal son, right? So through the Holy Spirit, that stirs our soul, right, to come to Christ, and the cross that moves us and inspires us to go towards God. So that is why both of them are leaning towards the house, and so we are returning back as the prodigal son.
Did you talk about the shape?
The what?
The shape that they make?
Shape? No, probably not.
Oh, the shape. So you notice how they're placed. What shape do they kind of make together? Look at what is it called? The negative space. That's technical term, but the negative space. Yeah, somebody say. It looks like a chalice, right? That's how we have communion with God. There we go. I remember when I was in seminary, they presented that icon. My mind was blown when you said that. You got to think about that. So now when I see the chalice, I think about this. Anyway, continue on.
No, absolutely no. So absolutely go and read more about this because I have barely scratched the surface of explaining this icon. So please, it is the Olden icon done by Andrei Rublev. Any other questions? I believe he's holding a church. Right, like he was part of the first church and a deacon ordained in the church. Oh, okay. That's the end of my presentation. This is all black.